Hi everyone, this is Sean from the Avalon Library. Today we are going to be doing a quick overview and introduction of Photoshop. This is definitely meant for beginners, so don't come in looking for any advanced tips. But if you are new to it, this should give you a good idea of just what you can accomplish and where you would need to go to find the tools to do it. This is the screen you're going to see when you first log in. You won't necessarily have anything in here because this is recent files. We have a couple of things in here already. You'll notice this up at the top called Build Your Skills. If we bring down Show Suggestions, we're going to see that there's actually quite a few tutorials already built in here, and it is not a terrible idea for you to go ahead and go through them when you are new here. We are not going to do that right now. You can always get them back by hitting that. They will always be in the program, so if you forget anything, you can go ahead and get back to them. And you can generally find most of this stuff on Google and YouTube as well. So let's get started. We're going to work with this image that we got actually from a Photoshop tutorial, just because it's a good one to sort of show you all the things you can do. We're going to begin with the most basic things. And to start, I think we're going to look at the things you can do with the main bar up across the top here. File doesn't really have anything all that surprising in there. That's where you go to start a new file, open an existing one. You can open the recents there. If you open something as a smart object, it does give you some more options for what you can do with it, but we're not going to get into that today. Also save as if you need to change the name. And print is down here too. The other stuff we're not really going to get into for now. Export does let you export as different file types, but in general for Photoshop you can do that with save as. It's more with some of the other programs where that comes in handy, or with other more advanced uses. Edit is, well, let's go ahead. For us to get edit to work, we're going to have to highlight something. So the first thing we're going to do is come over here and get the Marquee Tool. And by default, it has the rectangular Marquee Tool selected. And you notice too, when you hover the mouse over something, it brings up a little quick animation showing you exactly what it is that it does. We're just going to go ahead and click that to get that started. And we bring it out here, and we can just go ahead and highlight an area in here. And now you see you have the rectangle around it. If you've highlighted something and you don't like what you've done, you can hit Control D on the keyboard. That is the shortcut to do that. If you're on a Mac, you would hit Command D. And you can see it just goes right away. You could also have gone up to Edit and hit Undo, but it's generally a little faster to just do it that way. In particular, if you've already taken several steps since you've done that and you don't want to go back and undo everything, but the highlight's still there, and sometimes that does happen. So we're just going to go ahead and re-highlight again, though, so we can see what we have in the Edit menu. Again, like I said, we have that Undo button there, which we're not going to work with now. You can cut or copy. When you copy, you leave the original behind. When you cut, you completely remove it, and we'll go ahead and do that right now, just so you can see. So it has left this blank area in here. When we come back in and we hit paste, now it's going to put it just a little bit off. We're going to want to come back up here and get the move tool selected again. And you can put it back where you want it to, or you can adjust it however you want. There isn't really much reason for that in this particular case, so we're going to go ahead and do undo move, undo paste, and undo cut pixels and get all the way back to the beginning there, and then we can Control D and get rid of that. And you can use a keyboard shortcut to do all those undos. I don't know why I don't do that. But you can see on here it shows you what they are. It's Control Z. I have no idea. I can only remember so many shortcuts at a time, I guess. So that is what happens with me. Let's get that highlight again just so we can see a couple other choices. Some of these, like check spelling, is obviously not relevant here. If we had text, that would work. Transform is where you can do things like scale, rotate, skew, all of that sort of thing. You'll find in general, the rotate you might wind up using, and flip. Those things come up. The other ones for beginner stuff you're not going to use too much. Maybe like rotate, scale. Free transform is probably more what people are used to, where then it changes the grid to have these little squares on it, and you can then go ahead and move it like that. When you move out here, you notice how it turns into a curved arrow. We can sort of tilt things around that way. Come down here and do that. Like a bunch of different things. If you hold Shift while you're dragging one of these squares, you see how instead of doing the whole image to scale, in the correct, keeping the ratio the same. It just stretches it. But yeah, so you click with your mouse, with your left mouse button on any of these squares and drag, and then it causes the effect. Now, I don't really want to do any of that, so I'm going to come up here and we're going to hit this thing that looks like the no smoking sign. And it just puts everything back, because when we've done something like that, until we actually hit that little check mark there to save it, it is not finalized. So we can just hit that little no smoking type sign and go back to where we came from. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else really in there that comes up too much. I mean, again, like for more advanced users, there will be some things in there that you'll use, but we are not really going to be doing that. An image, you're not really going to play with that. You can change what kind of images, like color, grayscale, a couple things like that. You have adjustments in here. Now these you might wind up using, like brightness. Let's even go with that. It just brings up another window with sliders in it, and you just drag to where you want. Like you can see that's getting like really washed out this way and really darkened this way. We'll just put it back to 0. Contrast. Now in this case, that's really, I actually quite like what's happened there. Yeah, that's boring. Like this with all that color pop, that's really pretty. But we're not going to do that right now. Cancel out of there. There was, actually, let's go back into that. There was, you notice, a button here called Auto. And if we click that, it uses its AI to determine what is the best way for this to look. And you actually notice, so it did bring the contrast almost all the way up to where we had it there, and then it just brought the brightness down a little bit. And as far as what it thinks that is the best way that this picture can look, and I have to say, I quite like it. So, I mean, I'd be inclined to let it ride. Let's go ahead, we'll let it happen. And then we're going to go ahead and say File and Save As. And let's go ahead and make this Norway edited. Just so we keep the original behind, but now we have this new copy that has our changes built into it. And we can always go back and undo other things at this point, but I kind of like that one, so we're going to keep it. When we come back to adjustments, there's a couple other things here, like hue, saturation, color balance, black and white. There are some photo filters, invert, things like that. You can just play around with them. Let's go to hue saturation. This one, unfortunately, does not have an auto button, because that would have been kind of fun to see what it would have done. I think there is a thing, though, that, yeah, we do these auto tone, contrast, and color. Yeah, that's pretty. And we can keep hitting those things and get it how we want it there. So I quite like that, actually. Image size, you don't have to play with that too much. You will have times where, say, you're uploading something to Facebook and it says that the file is too big. You could come back in here to image size, and now it's going to show you like how big the file itself is here. And you can change that downwards just by changing the width and the height. As long as this little lock, or this little chain here, is there, like with the line connecting it, any changes that you make to the width and the height will match up so things stay in the same ratio. Once you get rid of it, if you change the width or the height, you are now going to skew the way that the image looks. So in general, you're probably going to want to leave it that way. Let's go ahead and say, well, we're going to leave it as it is because I don't want to mess it up. But you could, well, you can change it. Let's make it significantly smaller. Let's say down to 10. And we can just hit OK. Now you see this has changed it to much smaller. It's not even megabytes anymore. It's down to kilobytes. We hit this. It is going to change on the screen. Now this is a very, very tiny one, which I said I don't really want that, so we're going to go back to undo. But you could find that you have to do that from time to time. You can also make the pictures bigger, but the problem with that is as you make them bigger, you will tend to run into problems with pixelation. Photoshop is better at keeping that to a minimum than some other programs are, but it is still a thing that is going to happen, and the more you try to enlarge it, the more noticeable that effect is going to be. The one other thing I would say when we are doing the image size is this resolution per inch. You kind of want that to be higher to get a better picture quality. Like I'm going to go ahead and just say 300. Like it's not very likely to make much difference here. Oh, yeah, so it blew it up because now we've made it more like put more pixels in there. We don't really need it zoomed in like that. I'm going to leave it alone though. So to zoom out, you can hit Control minus on your keyboard. Likewise, the Control plus zooms in. There are other ways to do that, but like Control minus and Control plus comes in handy, especially because that actually winds up working in a lot of other programs. Oh, and again, like for a Mac, I believe it's Command minus and Command plus, although I'm on Windows right now, so don't hold me to that for Mac. You have the canvas size in here. That makes it so the background can change size. Image rotation. I'm not going to really play around with the rest of this. I've never really done analysis before. Layers, we're not really going to get into much here. What happens with the layers is that's over here. Like right now we only have this one layer because this file that I opened there's a JPEG. If we wanted to have more than one layer, like let's say we wanted to create a transparent background of some kind. So in order to do that, we first have to highlight the entire image. We're going to go to Edit and hit Cut. So this leaves us with a white background. We're going to go ahead and right-click on it, and then we're going to pick Layer from Background. And what we want to do here is change the opacity down to 0%. And hit OK, and now you see this checkerboard pattern, and that means it appears transparent. So if you were to get this printed onto a piece of paper or put it onto a shirt or something like that, anything that shows up as the checkerboard pattern would just be negative blank space in the final image. Now that's provided you save it as a PNG file. If we have it saved as a JPEG file, which we are currently doing, it'll just show up as white in the final image. So we could even actually go ahead and go to File, Save As. We already have it as edited. Change the file type here where it says Photoshop. Change it to PNG, and now hit Save. And this, go ahead and leave it on the highest one. And this does allow you to have that transparent background, which if you were trying to design something to put on a shirt especially is what you're going to want rather than just have it be a giant white rectangle. It's also good if you're going to try and use the image later to superimpose on top of another image. You really need to have that transparent space. But anyway, so now we're going to go ahead and put back what we took from before and hit paste. And now you notice that made it a separate layer over here. So we have the transparent layer in the back and the layer with the picture in the front. And you can use a little eyeball to turn them off. They're still there, you just can't see them anymore. When you save it though, whatever's turned off, like in the Photoshop file it's still there, but once you save it as a JPEG or a PNG, if it isn't visible when you save it, it is not in the final image, so just be aware of that. And now you'll notice later on when we try to remove things or whatever, like, well, let's even do one right now. If we were to just highlight an area and cut it, where we could just take that Marquee Tool, we've got a rectangle, and we can just hit delete on the keyboard, and now it's gone, and there is a transparent spot right there that goes through to the back. Of course, we did not want to do that, so let's get rid of that. When you have one of the layers highlighted, and you click on layer, now it gives you these different options for what you can do to that layer. Sending it down, like, moves it down a layer, flatten the image, gets rid of the layers and puts them into one. You generally don't really want to do that. I'm sure there are reasons why you would want to, but I have not personally come upon them yet. Layer style is where you're going to have some things where you can put some effects on top of it. Most of these are not going to make a lot of sense for this right now. They'd be probably better if we had like text on here, but we'll just go ahead and pick, you can say color overlay. Then we've changed the color to gray, and it's at 100% opacity, so it's put it over there. We can like bring that down, and you can change whatever color you want. It just gives a transparent sort of tint over top of everything. Now, why you would want to do that in this case, I don't know. So we are going to get rid of that. But it's a thing. I mean, I can think of different photos where you might want to do that. We'll come back into that when we have some text or something like gradient overlay. Again, you want the opacity to come down. This doesn't really look like a great one here. Let's pick something that's a little bit more exciting. What do we got here? Here's some pink gradient overlays. Let's try this one. And you can play around with them. Let's change the angle. There we go. So what this has happened now, a gradient just means it's going from one color to another. So you get the darker purple over here and then the lighter pink over there. I mean, it's pretty, but it's kind of pointless in this case. Filter is, I mean, exactly what it says. It just has some more filters and things you can do in there. You can blur it, distort it, pixelate it, different things like that. All sorts of different types of each thing, so we'll just pick one here. You see it's giving you a sample of what it's going to look like inside here. I'm not thinking I like that very much. What can I do? Well, that is something. I cannot say I care for that. Let's try it with medium dots. I don't know. Like, let's hit OK, and then you'll see the final thing. I'm definitely not going to keep this. Well, okay, that's better than the preview made it look. I don't think I would still want to keep it, but it's just an interesting little effect. We can hit undo. I mean, there's all sorts of filters on here. Sharpen is probably the one you're going to come up with the most, just because we've all had that where you have an image that's a little bit blurry. This one is not especially, so I don't know that Sharpen's going to make too much difference. Yeah, so you just click it and it did it. It doesn't look like it changed much of anything, but there are some images where that would be very helpful. Anything else over there? We don't want the video right now. Here's one. I've never even tried high pass before, so let's see what happens. Well, I don't like that. Okay, so that's all. I mean, it almost looks like it's. I'm not sure what it's doing actually. Someone with more information about photography would be able to tell me what that means exactly. It was interesting though. 3D we're really not going to get into here. That's where you can add 3D layers. Just like text that looks like it's popping out and everything. It's a little weird. We're not going to get into that. It doesn't come up all that often. View is another place where you can also go ahead and zoom in and zoom out, fit it on the screen, things like that. You can turn things off and on that are on the screen. I tend to just sort of leave that alone. And then window also controls things that are on the screen. Like there isn't really much on here right now. But if we click on different things, like it'll bring the little menu up over here, and that can turn those things off. Help is another place you can find the tutorials. We're not going to get into that right now, but let's go ahead and start our way down the toolbar. So you're going to spend most of your time clicking on the things in the toolbar. Sometimes you'll have to make adjustments right up here, and what appears up there varies depending on which tool you have selected. If you click and hold on any of these, it will bring up different options. Like right now, rectangular marquee tool is there by default. You can change it to elliptical, and then it changes it that way over here. I tend to try to remember to change them back to the first item just because it makes it easier for me to remember exactly where things are going to be. But if you don't need to do that, don't worry about it. Lasso. It's another way to select things. It's what it sort of sounds like. You just bring it around. And there you go. It's more like free drawing the marquee tool, basically. Nothing else really interesting about that. The more interesting thing in here is going to be the magnetic lasso tool. And what that does is it allows you to draw around a specific item in the picture. It'll be a little easier to do that. In this case, if we've zoomed in, so we're going to hit Control Plus until we zoom in on something. And what is something we think this will have an easier time finding? So this is generally pretty accurate, but not always. Let's say we want to do this white house here. We'll start at the corner, and then you just start dragging. You don't have to hold the mouse. You just click once and drag along. And you can see it's following the roof line there. As we follow along here, it's mostly pretty smart, especially with how the colors are very different here, that it can figure out to follow along. So right there, it gets a little thrown off. We have to come back and fix that later. I mean, that might be part of the same house. I don't think it is, but we can always fix that later. In the cases where it does that, I could have just clicked and caused it to put a little dot there, but by the time that I did that, it was too late. Like here, we can click and add one because we know that's the corner of the roof. And then we're going to come our way down here. Hopefully it'll figure it out right here because I don't feel like clicking. Possibly should have picked something smaller. You can see it messed up on the balcony. Oops, and I messed up by not following that side wall. But for this, it doesn't really matter. Now, this is going to be tricky. Let's see if I can avoid the house that's in the front there. Having these two white things are going to cause a bit of a problem. Anyway, for all intents and purposes right now, that'll be fine. So now we've highlighted that. We could just hit delete and we've removed it. Now, of course, it's left a giant gaping hole in the picture, which is not necessarily ideal. But for now, you get the idea of what would happen there. Of course, we do not want to leave it that way, so we're going to undo it, and then we're going to deselect. That does come in handy with trying to remove specific things, especially when you don't mind it having a transparent background. Object Selection Tool is pretty interesting. That is where we draw a rectangle around an area, and I did not do a very good job there. Let's zoom out, actually. Let's do something that can have a good time. Let's say we want to do this house up here. So draw a rectangle around an area, and it should just figure out, like, yeah. So it's found the two things. I don't know why I picked that, but it's found the things that it thinks we want to get rid of. We can go ahead and hit delete, and they're gone. Pretty simple. It skipped all that having to trace everything around there. I'm sure it would not do as good if I did it. That's the thing where, like, it's good, but it's not great. You can see, like, it's got part way down that house there, so, not ideal. What if we make it bigger? Yeah, not really too much better there. Oh, that is not what I wanted. Yeah, so we'll get rid of that. But you get the idea of that. Like, maybe over here it would be a little better. Yeah, it found that pretty well. Anyway, there's also a quick selection tool. It's just another variation on the same thing. I think that's, yeah, you just drag it around and it determines what it thinks you're trying to highlight and gets it. Again, not going to be as accurate as some other things. Like this is a little better on the house, actually. Not perfect, but better. What happens there? Yeah, it's okay. It would still be at that point, you would have to come back and do some touching up, but what you have left to do is not really that bad anymore. Then the last thing is the magic wand tool, and that's going to be where you just click on something and it decides that's what you want. Like there, I clicked on that. It figures that's what I want. That's very not correct, but whatever. In images where the thing you're selecting is more noticeably different from its surrounding, like say maybe like this car. I clicked on the exact wrong part of that car. Boy, it does not want to do that. Maybe not that car. How about this? Well, yeah, there's enough different shading and things. So yeah, I mean, your mileage is going to vary on that one. We're going to go ahead and put it back there. Crop. There's nothing really surprising about that. You do that, and it's going to crop the image into this. So we can move things around to decide where we want to crop it to. We can click on the corners here to make it a bigger or smaller crop. And that's that. It allows you to decide exactly what part of the picture you want to keep if you are going to cut it down to a smaller size. The frame tool, this is not going to be a good image for that, but what that basically does is it allows us to pop a little spot in here that we can now have saved to pop something else into, and then you can move this around, like if you're laying out like a catalog or something like that, or a menu, and you just want to have a bunch of the same size space filled with different images. You would pop that down and then plop the image into it over here. We're not really going to get into that one right now. That's getting beyond where we need to be. Eyedropper allows you to just pick a color. You do that and you see up here in the color area it has gone right to the one we picked. In this picture there's not going to be much call for that, but we'll see, we might come back to it. I think we could even, if we find, when we come across the paint bucket, we might go ahead and do that. The spot healing is something that you're going to find a little bit more interesting. Let's watch that little demo there. That does allow you to basically erase things out of the picture. You have control over how big it is up here. We click on the little circle and we can make it bigger or smaller. You can see in this case we kind of want it to be pretty big. Let's say we want to get rid of these cows. We can just click on it and now, ta-da, the cow is gone. And you see it messed up a little bit there. Just do that and now it's fine. And you want it to be under content aware. That basically means that the AI for the program just examines the surrounding area and decides what it is that you might want in place of the object you're getting rid of. Make it a little bigger here. Let's see if we can't get rid of that. Yep, now that's gone. You see, it did a really good job on that one. Now, there are going to be some things where it is not good. Luckily, that's what the undo button is for, because you can very easily find yourself getting rid of something and then what it replaces it with is just completely wrong. Let's see if we can't get that here, because we can hold and paint with that. Let's see if we can't get this house, and we'll see what it does, because I suspect it will not do very good. Once we let go, yeah, and see, like, this is not the worst. We could theoretically just keep going at this, and it would probably sort things out here. But yeah, I mean, I think that, like, any professional person would be able to tell that that was not a very good job there. But, I mean, if you really wanted that house out of the picture, you could have done a worse job, we'll say. Because we do not want to do that. So now we're going to hit undo several times. Or let's see, I'll remember to do Control Z. Ta-da! And now we have the house back. It does, like this one over here would probably do a bit better with, but I think we're going to want to come back and do that with something else. There are a couple other things over here. There's the healing brush tool. Again, we're going to want to make that much bigger based on the size of this picture. I always forget that. When you do that, you always have to alt-click first what you want to be the source that it's replacing with. So let's say we're up here in the tree area and we want it to use that. So we're going to hit the Alt button on the keyboard, and you see it change to a little bullseye. We click with that, and now we're back to this. And now we can draw over what we want. You see, it's even putting like a preview of what exactly it's going to do. So let's say we want to get rid of that. And they go like it's the previews, just to give you an idea, because you see it didn't exactly match, but it did a really good job of getting rid of that. Let's say there's something over here that's kind of weird, so let's get rid of that too. I don't know. So we don't like these power lines, although we might not, because it's so far away, we might not like that. So let's alt-click there, and then do that. Now that power line is gone. It just sort of cleans things up. Of course, now you can see there are power lines in here with no towers, so that's a little odd. We can just come through there and do that, and they're gone if you even notice them in the first place. And that gives you an idea of what that is. The patch tool. This one always throws me for a loop here, so let's go. So what you wind up doing with that is you're going to draw an area that you want to patch first. And let's say we're going to do it over here. So once you've drawn that, you're going to drag it out to what you want the source to be. And you see it's giving you an idea of what's going to happen in the little window that you drew there. So let's see what happens if we just pick, I don't know, I kind of like that red tree, so I don't want to mess that up too much. Let's add some color from here, maybe. Now, it interpolates the idea from them, patches it over, sort of fills it in. If someone was paying attention, they could tell that there's like a duplication over here, but without really noticing, that building is gone and it's pretty cleanly done. The move tool allows you to swap things around the image, so we're going to draw what we want to move first. Let's say this White House here. And now we're going to go ahead and move it to where we want. So after you moved it, we hit that little check. And now it's over there, and we can hit Control D. And see, I mean, it did a pretty good job. Like this especially looks pretty natural over here. If someone really looked closely, they could tell something was a little weird over there, but most people probably would not notice that. The red eye tool, there's obviously nothing I can do about that with this one, but you can guess what that's going to do. Well, let's just, like, that's what it's going to look like. You would click on the red eye, and it would take care of that. Like, pretty straightforward for that. Otherwise, over here we have things like the paintbrush, and there's a couple different things like a pencil. I don't really want to paint anything in here. You get the idea, like you just scribble on there. I mean, obviously, other people would be much better at that. And on a tablet or with a USB tablet plugged in, you might do better with that. Stamp, you just pattern like you stamp patterns on there. That's a little bit more advanced. I haven't gotten into that too much yet. Eraser. That's going to be an interesting. That's going to be an interesting one. Again, you control it with the size up here. We're going to want it to be pretty big given how many pixels are in this picture. The hardness determines how much what you erase blends in. So 100% means like if I do this, it's just making like I put a hole punch in there. If I come back in there and soften it up, it's going to get a little bit blurry around the edges. So that can create like a certain effect, especially if you are, say, trying to like have it sort of fade out on the edges. You can sort of draw around there with that. Not going to be much point for that in here, so we're not going to worry about that. The background eraser erases the background, but we don't really have one. Magic eraser. As you can see, you just click on something with that, and it sort of guesses things are like roughly the same color, and it just gets rid of them. That was not super great. Yeah, we don't really want to do that either. You're going to have mixed results with that. Like with a lot of the AI things, you're going to have some mixed results. Aside from, like I said, those spot healing things work pretty well. Actually, let me put that back how it was. Gradient kind of does the same thing that we were having with the filters. We're not going to worry about that too much. It is a bit different, but it doesn't come up too much. The paint bucket is going to be the thing that you might want to use, and that comes back to how we have the color picker up here. So we still have that sort of pinkish color picked. You can also see it over here. The second image behind it would be like for a background color, but that's not really relevant for what we're doing right now. Let's just say we want to put that onto this little house here. Click on the white space, and now everything that was the white space changes over like that, unless that's where it can be a little bit finicky, like if it has something that's a little bit different of a shade, it doesn't like it, so you can see it faded off down there. Now you can actually control just how finicky that is by using tolerance. So like if we put this down to a 5 and then do the same thing, that didn't change much over there. Yeah, so on the front it actually left more white space over there. Let's bring it up to a 90 and then try that front again. Now you see it's bleeding off a little bit more. So basically what that means is it tolerates larger variations in the shade when you're doing it. If you go too high with that, it will bleed over into colors that you don't want it to bleed over into. And in a picture like this in particular, that can become problematic. With some, it's really not going to make any difference. And you have a couple things like Anti-Alias Contiguous that just controls some other things. I would generally leave that alone. Like I usually have Anti-Alias checked. But you can turn that off if you don't like the results you're getting there. So the blur tool, as you can guess, it just adds a nice little blurry effect onto things. Did I get that? Let's make it a bit smaller because that is a crazy size. Bit too small. That's better. You can see it is not really accomplishing very much here. So I don't know. Your mileage will vary with that one, we'll say. How many times did I click that? There's also the opposite being a Sharpen Tool and then a Smudge Tool, which just sort of, let's see if it gives a little demo. No. Not going to accomplish much with that. Let's make it bigger. So you can see it's sort of like I just dragged my finger across it and left this smudge. We have no real use for that right now, so we're going to get rid of that. You can see that dodge tool, that's an interesting one. And then it lightens the areas of an image. Let's say it's a little bit dim back here. So you can see what's happening is it's just taking out the shadow, making it a bit brighter. In this case, I don't know, I kind of like the picture before, but you know, making it look maybe more like a bright, vibrant day. It really, with the grass, it really improves things. I don't know, I don't hate that, but we'll go back. burn basically just does the opposite, makes it a little bit darker, so it's like it singed it. And the sponge, you're really not going to do this too much, but it does change the color saturation in select areas. You're really not going to do that too much. The pen lets you draw and make paths. Text is another one you're probably going to use pretty often. Once you get that, you just click somewhere. By default, the font size we're getting is incredibly small, so let's come up to something. It stops at 72, but you can write in whatever size you want. So I'll just type in 250 and hit enter. And by default, it shows you that lorem ipsum text to give you an idea of what it's going to look like, and then we can drag it around. Say we want it to be there, and change the color. Like white would probably work here. When you're done, you just hit OK. You can always come back and click it again. If you get the selector and click it, it'll bring up. You're back up here, and now we can go ahead and pick your font. Put whatever you want in there. I don't know. Drag it around again. Whatever you need to do. Change the alignment, the color still. You can make it feel warped. We're not going to do any of that right now, though. We don't really need to. So that is over there. It does also have vertical type. So you might wind up doing that just to get the font going, the text going up and down. And then there's the last thing where you can draw some shapes on here, like rectangles, circles, lines, that sort of thing. Okay, so we'll just do a couple little things to pretty this up. Let's go ahead first and make this be a nicer font. So we're just going to click on that to make sure that is selected, like double click. We get this menu back up here. Let's pick something a little bit more bold. So we'll go back to that, like this, I don't know, maybe a little cleaner. Because you will not have this many fonts on your computer, I would think. I have way too many. But this one will be fine. And let's go ahead and let's get the character menu to show up. So here we go. So we get that character to come up, so we get some more font choices over there. Let's hit this TT, which I forget what that is, all caps. I thought it had a fancier name than that. Anyway, so we can even make this a bit bigger. Let's say 400. That's pretty good. And then we can move it around. Let's get it centered. So when you see that pink line running down the center there, that means you have it centered on the horizontal axis. If we come down here like this, you'll get one that shows when it's on the vertical axis, which I'm not quite getting. Like we can get it to sit on it. I'm not getting it in the middle here. Sometimes it does not cooperate, but whatever. That's good enough. I kind of want this to be, I don't know, we want to see the houses, I think, so here we go. If you want to change the text, just get the little T, click in here, and we can change this to say anything like, there you go. And that's that, and hit this. Now, of course, we have to adjust it again because it's definitely not centered. Oh, there it was. Well, we'll just settle for that for now. Let's say we want to make it so that we have a shape and that is cut out of it. So we're going to come down here to the rectangle. We're just going to go ahead and draw one in here, roughly where I want it to be. And we can adjust that. Now that's actually saying I've got it pretty good, so we're just going to stop it right there. We can leave it with that color. Now you notice that this is covering the text. So we're going to come over here to the layer section and just click and drag it so it's underneath that in the list here. So now the text has come to the front. You'll also notice in the rectangle thing here, like this area is the fill and this is the outline. So you can have a second area outlined in like a different color. I actually don't really want that. It's down to 0 pixels too, so we can make it bigger. I mean, that's fine, but I don't really want that. So we're just going to go ahead and get rid of that and that. Just the one color is fine. Now, let's say we want to get it so that the waterfront text is cut out and we can see the image behind it. We're going to go ahead and on a PC, hit Control, and then get the waterfront. And oops, I did not mean to double click. Yeah, and there we go. So now you can see that waterfront is got the little moving dashed lines around it. On a Mac, you would have hit Command and then clicked on it until that happened. So once we've done that, we're going to come down and click on the rectangle. And we're going to come to the Layer menu. and click on Layer Mask, and yeah, or just hover over it. I'm going to come down and pick Hide Selection. And now you notice right now it doesn't look any different. Everything looks the same, but if we go ahead and either hide or delete the text, now you can notice you can see right through it. And we can move that around and do whatever we wanted with it. And that's in the image. That gives you a really cool effect. Let's say also too we want to add like the logo for the library on here. So, and that's good because you can add any sort of other image you have into this image. So I already have in File Explorer, I have one ready to go here. So we're going to just find the file we want. It's a picture, and we're going to drag it over here. And once you see that little plus sign, we can let go. And now it's in here, and we can move it around. Let's say we want that to be maybe a little bit bigger, and let's center it down here. And we're done. Just hit the check up here. And that's it. This is like a quick little way to get going, and you can put as many different images as you want here. You notice that now the logo shows up as another layer over here. You can move them forwards and backwards and top of each other and merge them, whatever you need to do. That is it for the basics for this. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to contact us at the information at the end of this video. And good luck. Hopefully this is enough to get you started using this program.